In the last episode, we stopped at the mandatory punishment for adultery or fornication. So, what is the prescribed punishment? Because we are studying the chapter that deals with prescribed punishments in Islam. We spoke about adultery, we spoke about so many things in the last episode, the prescribed punishments and the justifications and how to counter attack those who criticize them or doubt them. So now we're talking about the major sin of fornication or adultery. So what is the prescribed punishment for that? In Islam, there's a difference between a person who falls into such a sin and the category or the silver lining, if you wish, that divides between whether to be stoned to death or flogged 100 lashes. What differentiates between the two is the actual ihsan. And what is ihsan? Ihsan is a description that fits an individual if he were to ever get married in a legitimate marriage where he has consummated or she has consummated that marriage. So a muhsin or a muhsan is a person who is married at the moment, has a wife, or was married in the past, meaning he divorced his wife, or is a widow. This person is considered to be a muhsan, and if he were to commit the sin of zina, he would be stoned to death. And what is a non-muhsan? Anyone else is a non-muhsan. So even if a person got married but did not consummate the marriage and was divorced or widowed, he's a non-muhsan. If he commits zina, he would be flogged. If a person never got married in his life, yet he had many illicit, illegal, haram relationships that included zina, he would not be considered as a muhsan, because there is a difference between committing the act of intercourse when you're not married and when you're married and doing it. So the taste of intercourse for a married person is different than when it is illegal and haram. And if a person had sexual intercourse illegally, was never married, or committed sodomy, was never married, or did anything that is haram while not being married, this would not make him a muhsan. He's still a non-muhsan, and his punishment is being flogged 100 lashes, as mentioned in Surah An-Nur. And in order for this punishment, whether stoning or flogging, in order for it to be implemented, the adulterer or the fornicator must have a number of conditions. Number one, he has to be an adult. One would say, well, can a child have intercourse? Some cases, yes, and he's not an adult. For a girl who's not an adult and did not reach the age of puberty, she can commit the act of fornication, and we cannot implement the prescribed punishment on her as well. The fornicator has to be sane. So if someone who is mentally challenged to the extent that psychiatrically he is labeled as insane, if he commits zina, then we do not implement the prescribed punishment. He has to be free, and this is an issue of dispute, but there is no dispute that if a free slave commits zina and he was married, then would we implement the stoning? The answer is no. He has to be flogged, and he has to be flogged 50 lashes, half of the punishment prescribed for a free person, as mentioned in Surah An-Nisa, where Allah Azza wa Jal stated that slave women, when they commit adultery, they should be punished half of the punishment of a free woman. And when it comes to stoning, you cannot divide stoning into two halves and give him or her half of the punishment. So scholars say that it is remaining as it is, which is 50 lashes. And the fourth condition is that the adulterer or the fornicator had a previous sexual intercourse in a legitimate marriage. So if the marriage was void or not legitimate, this punishment is not implemented. Give an example, Sheikh. I'll give you an example. A couple divorced 3 separate divorces over the period of 5-10 years. They divorced once, reconciled, divorced again, reconciled, divorced a third time. So the woman goes to a young man and says to him, listen, I'd like you to marry me for a couple of days and then divorce me after having intercourse, of course, so that I can get married again to my ex-husband. And this is known in Urdu as halala or halala. And this type of marriage is void. It does not exist. It does not take place, because there is agreement between the two. And the Prophet ﷺ described the boy, the man, as being the borrowed goat, as if he's been borrowed, so that he would have sex with other female goats and then returned to its owner. So likewise, a person who marries a woman who was divorced 3 times in order to make her halal and to make her allowed to get back to her ex-husband is a borrowed goat. So they get married, and the guy sleeps with her for a couple of nights and divorces her. A week or 2 later, he commits fornication with another woman. He's caught red-handed, or he confesses to the Muslim judge. And when going back to his history, we find that he is previously married, but his lawyer says, Your Honor, the man married in an invalid marriage contract. It was void because there is an agreement between the two, and it was timed for 2 nights. Here the judge says, then we cannot implement the stoning because his marriage was invalid. So the intercourse that took place in an illegitimate and invalid marriage, and he refers only to the second option of prescribed punishment, and that is flogging 100 lashes. What about the mandatory punishment for adultery? It is, as stated before, it is stoning. So if a man or a woman who were legitimately married and had intercourse with their spouses while married, if one of them commits adultery and he confesses or was caught red-handed with 4 male witnesses, as we will come and discuss inshallah later on, they all testify against him or her, in this case that individual must be stoned to death. See, stoning is something that the consensus of all scholars of Islam agree upon. It was reported that Umar, may Allah be pleased with him, said, Allah sent Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam with the message of the truth and revealed the book, which is the Quran, to him. His revelations included the verse that mentions stoning, and we read and understood it, meaning as companions. The Prophet ﷺ enforced the stoning punishment as we did after him. So the Prophet ﷺ stoned, and we have authentic hadith proving that, whether it is the hadith of Ma'iz ibn Malik or the hadith of Al-Ghamidiyya, and the Prophet stoned ﷺ, and so did we after him. Then he says, I fear that as time passes, someone might say that the stoning punishment is not in the punishment in Allah's books, and it's he says is not in Allah's book. Thus, people would err by abandoning something Allah has legislated. The stoning punishment is right and in Allah's book, applicable to stoning, enforceable on adulterous men and women, provided the required evidence is confirmed, or pregnancy takes place, or confession is given. Who said this? It was Umar ibn Khattab. And one claims, wait. I've read the Quran from cover to cover and I did not find any reference to stoning. And we covered this before. And we said that Allah mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah, مَا نَنْسَخْ مِنْ آيَةٍ أَوْ نُنْسِهَا نَأْتِ بِخَيْرٍ مِنْهَا أَوْ مِثْلِهَا أَلَمْ تَعْلَمْ أَنَّ اللَّهَ عَلَى كُلِّ شَيْءٍ قَدِيرٌ. Whatever ayah, whatever verse of the Quran we abrogate or we make you forget it, meaning Muhammad alayhi salatu wasalam, then we will replace it with something that is better than it or similar to it. So what is the concept of abrogation? An-naskh, abrogation, has different forms, and I explained that before, but I am certain that most of you have forgotten it, because knowledge, if you do not write it down and revise it every now and then, it will vanish from your head, because we're not computers. At least most of us aren't. Yes, there are people who are gifted with this gift of memorizing things, but not all of us are like that. So abrogation is of 3 types. Abrogation of the text while the ruling applies. Abrogation of the ruling while the text stays. Abrogation of both the text and the ruling. So abrogation of the ruling while the text remains is what we read a lot in the Quran, where Allah says, for example, about intoxicants, do not pray while you are in the state of intoxication until you are aware of what you recite. And this was in a particular phase of time when it was not prohibited to consume wine, but as a preliminary and introductive measure, Allah told them, do not be in the state of intoxication when you have to pray. So if I were to consume wine after Dhuhr, Asr time, I'll be intoxicated. So I can't do that. If I consume it after Asr, Maghrib time, I'll be intoxicated. So I can't do that. So the best time to be drunk is after Isha, because you have like 8 to 10, maybe 11 hours of night, and you will have time to sober out. Maybe after Fajr, because you'll have 6-7 hours to sober out. So this, at a phase of time, was permitted, but then it was abrogated, where Allah said you have to refrain and stay away from it. Khalas, end of story. So this is the abrogation of the ruling, while the recitation remains. The ayah itself is in the Quran, we read it. The second type of abrogation is the abrogation of the text. It's not in the Quran anymore, but the ruling remains. And the scholars give an example of the stoning. As Umar said, may Allah be pleased with him, stoning was an ayah. It was abrogated. It was taken out from the Quran. Why? This is Allah's choice. Yet the ruling remained because we read the ayah before it was abrogated and not to be recited anymore as an ayah. We also stoned at the time of the Prophet ﷺ a number of times, and we, the companions after the death of the Prophet ﷺ, we also stoned. We also stoned adulterers. So this is a confirmed ruling in Islam. The third and final type of abrogation is to abrogate the ayah and to abrogate its ruling as well. And we mentioned this in the book of breastfeeding or suckling, where in the beginning it was revealed in the Quran that 10 sucklings would prohibit a child and would make him the son of the woman who suckled him. This was abrogated into 5 sucklings instead of 10. And even that was abrogated from the Quran, but the ruling remains. So 10 is both abrogated text and ruling as well. So Islam prescribed this punishment to deter people from falling in such heinous crime. By the way, if you look into the Old Testament in the Bible, you'll find that stoning is live and present. So Islam is not the only religion that does this. But if you look at the sins that deserve stoning, you'd laugh. For example, if a person fornicates with the daughter of the priest has a daughter, and his daughter is a bit kinky, and she fools around, and a guy had sex with her. You stone this guy. Oof, I didn't know she was a priest's daughter. Tough bananas. Stone him to death. If a person curses the king or says bad thing about him, stone him to death. Ya Sheikh, where is the freedom of speech? First Amendment. Stone him to death. If a person is disobedient and undutiful to his parents, take him to the outskirts of the village and stone him to death. Oof! What is this? We ran out of stones, man. What are you doing? If an ox kills someone, stone the ox to death. Even the animals? Yep, even the animals. And there are many other. So when your house is made of glass, don't throw people with stones. Don't criticize Islam because Islam only made stoning to death a punishment for a single crime, nothing else. Even apostasy, if a person curses Allah or curses the Prophet or the Quran, we don't stone them to death. We behead them, but we don't make them suffer before they die, like as in the case. So stoning is part of Islam. And the Prophet, as prescribed earlier, stoned Ma'iz ibn Malik, may Allah be pleased with him, who came to the Prophet ﷺ and confessed of adultery. O Prophet of Allah, I committed adultery, so purify me. The Prophet ﷺ looks the other way. The man goes to the other side and said, O Prophet of Allah, I committed adultery, purify me. So the Prophet looks the other way, and he did this 4 times, which some scholars say that it takes the place of 4 male witnesses. After the 4th time, the Prophet ﷺ started to interrogate him, hoping that he retracts his statement. So he said, maybe you kissed her. And he said, no, I committed adultery. He said, maybe you hugged her. Maybe you just, flirted with her. And the man keeps on saying, no, no, no. And finally, the Prophet said, ﷺ, did you actually have sexual, penetrative intercourse? And the man says, yes. So the Prophet looked at his people and said, is he crazy? And his people replied, no, Prophet of Allah, he's sane. So he asked the companions, smell his mouth, maybe he's drunk. And he wasn't. When everything was so clear and there was no escape, no doubt in it, the Prophet told them to take him and to stone him to death. Now, if an adulterer does not meet these conditions that make a person a muhsan, then he is given a lesser punishment. And that punishment is to flog him 100 lashes and to exile him for 1 year. And this is an issue of dispute. The lashes, we have no dispute in that, because this is mentioned in the Quran. The exiling bit, to exile a person, this is what Imam Shafi'i and Imam Ahmad, schools of thought, stated that yes, we have to combine the physical punishment with exiling him to another country or another village. Imam Malik says, yes, I agree. The combination is legit and we have to do that as per the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ, but not for the female fornicator. Why? He said a female fornicator needs a mahram. And by ordering her to be exiled for a year, we would actually also exiling her mahram, who's innocent, who did not do any wrong thing. So why would we force him to accompany her when he's an innocent person? Imam Abu Hanifa says that no, even boys and girls must not be exiled, because this was not mentioned in the Quran, and because this punishment may lead to more heinous sins. So if I were to exile a boy to another country, he would fall into zina over and over again because nobody's watching, nobody knows him. And he would be encouraged to do these heinous sins. But this justification, this reasoning is going against the instruction of the Prophet ﷺ. What did the Prophet say ﷺ? In the hadith of Ubaidah ibn Samit, the Prophet said ﷺ, take this from me, take this from me. Allah has stated a way for them, that is, for the adulterers. The virgin man and the virgin women, 100 lashes and exile for a year. So this is the authentic hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. We cannot say that we should not implement this because of logic. It's a hadith. Some scholars in contemporary times of our times said, for example, I live in Jeddah. So if someone fornicates and we catch him red-handed, or he confesses and we flog him 100 lashes, when we exile him, we said, okay, as a punishment, we will exile you to Dubai. And the guy says, whoa, I hit the jackpot. Dubai? So no, maybe Bahrain, or maybe we'll send you to London or Vancouver, maybe Paris. So nowadays, exiling people is a luxury. People would love to be exiled because it's not like it used to be in the past. So contemporary scholars said that locking someone up in a prison cell for a whole year, that would be an excellent substitution to exiling him to another country where we don't know how things would progress. And this is a very sound judgment and a very good alternative, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best.